Okay, we're ready to begin our second coding challenge, and we're looking at conditional statements. Now, conditional statements are also referred to as if-else statements, and the purpose of such statements is to check one or more conditions and then perform an action based on the outcomes that are or are not met. Okay, so it's a simple way to check to see if your code something in your code meets a certain condition. If it does, then you can get a certain task to occur. If not, then something else will occur. Okay, and we'll actually go through that with a short example. Now, in this example, we have um, the first line of the if statement, which is if 25 is greater than 18. Okay, so this symbol here is a comparison operator. It's referred to as the greater than operator. So we'll be talking about comparison operators in more detail shortly, but what you need to know right now is it's checking to see if this value, which is 25, is greater than 18. And we know that that condition is true. 25 is greater than 18. It always will be greater than 18. And in that case, once that condition has been checked, it will print out 25 is greater than 18. Now, it will never get to the else statement here. Okay, it will never, as it is currently, it will never get to the else statement because this will always be true. Okay, and if this is always true, it will execute this line of code and then it will exit the if statement. We could change this if we wanted to. If we wanted to have the user enter both numbers from the command line, okay, if there was some form of input, then after the input we can check to see what values have been entered, and there's more of a likelihood that this statement will then run because it's based on values that the user enters. Okay, but as it is, the else statement in this example will never run because 25 is always greater than 18. Okay, now comparison operators, we have already looked at the greater than, and we've looked at an example in the first task, which was the quiz. But let's just take a look at the ones that you can use. Well, we have really six comparison operators. There's the less than operator, which is the left arrow. There's the less than or equal to, okay, which checks to see if a value is less than or equal to a specific value. There's the greater than, which is the right hand arrow, which points to the right. And what this is looking at is if a certain value is greater than another value. On number 4, we have greater than or equal to, okay, which is the right hand arrow and the equal sign. One thing I would like to note, point out about these operators, especially those that are actually, you can see together at the side. Please do not put a space in between the operators here, otherwise they will not work. You can put a space between the values, right, and the operator itself, but not between the operators, okay? The next one is the equal to. Now, don't get confused with the single equals and the double equals. The single equals is an assignment operator, and what that does is it assigns a value to a variable or a constant. So for example, if we have a variable called age, we say age is equal to 15, then that means we are assigning the value of 15 to age. Whereas double equals, it's more comparing two different values, if A is equal to B. And then finally, we have the not equal to B, so not equal, sorry, and that is the exclamation mark and the equal sign. And here there's an example if A is not equal to B. So you'll be using some of these operators, especially this one here, the equal to, within this task. The logical operators, you'll be probably using two of these consistently, but not the third one, not so much. Now, the logical not is maybe slightly confusing to get your head around. What this does is it takes a value, and if that value equates to true, then it will flip it. It will say that the check will be based on the value being false. Don't know if that makes sense. Okay, so it will do a check, and if that check turns out to be true, then the condition that it is looking for is false. Okay, it might be a little bit more difficult, and maybe what I can do is I can draw that out with some examples. Um, but the next two are ones that you'll encounter the kind of most often, and that is the logical and this is where we're checking two different values. So A and B, and this is the ampersand. There's two ampersands here, right? Both values need to evaluate to true before that condition can be successfully met. Okay, and we'll look through an example as well next. And then finally, there's the logical or. This is where we're checking a particular value, whether that's one, whether it's A or B. Okay, one of those values needs to be true. One of those conditions needs to be true for the if statement to be evaluated successfully. Okay, so note the difference between logical and logical or. Logical and both conditions need to be true, whereas logical or either condition needs to be true for it to be successful. Let's just take a look at an example here. Now, as with all of the examples, you can just copy this in and paste it into the editor here. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to just remove these brackets and line numbers here. Once that's done, you'll be able to run this code. So what I'm going to do is just tidy this up a little bit so you can see. Okay. Okay, so this is our if statement. Now, let's just take a look at this. Now, this may or may not represent a real life situation, but I think it's sufficient enough for you for me to illustrate the concept to you. So we have an age constant here, which is set to 17, and we have a resident constant here, which is set to true, and this is known as a Boolean value, by the way. So we work with integers, which are numbers here. We work with string values, which are in quotations, and this is a Boolean value, true or false. So what this is doing is it's checking, this program actually checks to see if you are over the age of 18, including 18, so greater than or equal to 18, and at the same time, you are a resident of a particular country. Okay, so if you meet both conditions, then you're eligible to vote. Otherwise, you're not eligible to vote. Okay, so if we were to run this, you can see that it's looking for a condition of 18 for the age, and the age is currently 17. So it will only meet partially. So it's not meeting the first condition, but it meets the second condition where the resident is set to true. So because it meets the condition partially, it will skip this. It doesn't evaluate to true, and then it will say you are not eligible to vote. Let's just quickly run this and see that happen. So you should be able to see that it says you are not eligible to vote, which is what we're expecting. Okay. Now simply if we were to change this to 18 and run this, you're eligible to vote. Even if we change this up, if we go up here, you'll see that it'll still say you're eligible to vote. But as soon as we go below 18, let's just say you're 17 years old, you're not eligible to vote. Okay, and I hope that actually makes sense. Let's just say we wanted to modify this and modify it so either one of these conditions is set to true. Okay, so what we can use is we can use the or, which if you recall is the kind of vertical bar here. We just need to put some space between here and here. And this is saying if the age is greater than or equal to 18, or the residence is set to true, then you're eligible to vote. So you can see here that the age is 17, which means that it doesn't meet this condition. However, the resident is set to true and it meets this condition. So let's just see if we were to run that. And it's saying you are eligible to vote because it's met this condition. This is the or logical operator, okay? And that's the difference between the and the or. The and needs to have both conditions met, and the or only one of the conditions. Okay, so the task at hand is you'll need to write a program which checks two conditions, the username and the password, and it prints out a message if both are correct. Otherwise, it'll tell you if it's incorrect. And what I've done is I've given you some pseudocode because you know that we always start off with pseudocode. It's good practice to break a programming problem down into plain English. So let's just kind of go through this pseudocode so you can see what you're required to do. So the first thing you do is you need to create a constant that holds the correct username, which is a string. Note that it is required to be a string because you may not just have numbers in your username. It may have characters. Most likely you will have characters. So make sure that it is a string. Okay, and you know that by now that a string needs to be enclosed in quotations. You create a constant that holds the correct password, which is also a string. Then you print out a message telling the user to enter their username. You take input from the user, okay, using readline function. You should have developed an understanding of readline in the past example. Refer to that example if you need to revisit that, but the input from the user is assigned to a variable. Okay, you decide on what the name of that variable is going to be. In fact, any of the variables here, right? The next one is after that, once you've stored the username into a variable, you ask the user to enter their password, and that's also you also use the readline function, and it's also assigned to a variable. Then you check if the username that the user has entered is equal to the correct username which you've defined already, and if the password that is entered is equal to the correct password that you've defined already. If that is the case, then you can print out a message indicating the details are correct, else indicate that the details are incorrect. Okay, so that's just a short explanation of this particular task. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Thank you very much.